Hi, good evening, and thank you for joining me for another Kabbalah class on the Tanya. We are studying the second part of the Tanya and of chapter 26, and we have to finish. Last week we concentrated on the idea of joy. And 2 weeks ago we spoke about joy equals life. Connecting, living longer, living good. In addition, serving God can only be done in the midst of joy. Impossible to serve God otherwise. The rabbi is going to, in this week's portion, address how do we deal when there are obstacles, challenges, difficulties, where things cause us to get depressed. There might be a miracle, there might be an event, there might be rejection. There are many, many reasons that can cause a person to feel sad, to get into mood of sadness. And the rabbi right now has divided them into two categories. I believe later on it will be split into four. But this chapter is an opening and a summary of the next 7 chapters. So the rabbi is dividing into two. One is from day-to-day activities, and the other is from being distant from God. So when it comes to being distant from God, a person can be very sad. How come I'm not able to be up on time and pray to God? How come it's so challenging for me to give up a non-kosher food where God is asking me to keep kosher? Says the Rebbe, this is actually good because hopefully it will motivate the person to connect to God, to repair and start over. Every day is a new day. That's one way of looking at it. The other, so if it is the cause of the sadness is being distant from God, how come I'm unable to study Torah like somebody else? How come it's so difficult for me to keep Shabbat? Then the opposite. It should be a motivator, a jumping board to make us connect to God, try to connect, utilize it. And the rabbi is going to delve into this in great details. I believe the next chapter is going to be the first one the rabbi is going to talk about it, that actually taking a lemon and making a lemonade. But that's the point the rabbi is making right now. The second type of sadness, and this is where we got stuck, because it's very current. What happens if I am facing difficult situations, places, times? Someone is angry at me, is filing a lawsuit against me, my spouse wants to divorce me, I don't want to, I'm not allowed to enjoy food the way I used to, my children don't talk to me. There is a million reasons today more than ever. How do we deal with challenge? And some of them have nobody to be blamed. Not myself, not my spouse, not my kids, not my neighbors. It just, there was a hurricane came. We have a member who had lost a house. We have a member who had a store on St. Thomas. He brought to me the clothes. Half of them are all filled with salt water. All the merchandise is gone. What do you do when people are faced with such challenges? So the rabbi began with a revolutionary idea, and that's why I'm getting into it so many times, because we're going to talk about it so much that by the time you're done, you're going to be jumping from joy like a chassid. The rabbi explained, and he's bringing a verse from Proverbs where God compares righteous men who suffer, ve'ohavav, those who love God, ketzet hashemesh bigvurato, as the sun is removed from its covering or hiding and is fully revealed. And in summary, I've discussed it, I've shared that with you, and it's worth repeating. The Rebbe says that everything that happens to us is from God, good or bad. It's all from God. That's one fact. Second fact is God is good. Therefore, God does not take revenge. God does not hurt. God does not punish us. There is no such thing, and God will not allow it to happen to us. No matter how far we are from God, the fact that I exist, it means I am counted. Jew, Gentile, an animal, it doesn't matter. That's why we are obligated to respect all creatures. In fact, even the plants. If God had no use for the flower, it wouldn't be here. The fact that the flower is here is because God wants it to be here. We cannot comprehend. How is it possible to think about so many million movements every second, nanosecond? But we are human beings. That's the difference. We know today that a computer, I saw that the new computers, the new chips, can have 2 or 9 trillion commands in a nanosecond. It's just mind-boggling. You can blow up your mind from the amount of decisions or commands that the memory chip today does. Trillions, not millions or billions, trillions in a nanosecond. So compared to God, who created it, now we can understand why is it very unfathomable for us as human beings, because we are finite beings. So therefore, if it's from God, God is good and everything is for a good reason. I shared with you the story of Reb Aaron of Karlin. Karlin is a famous rabbi who said, anybody who comes to pray on his gravesite, he will beseech on God to avert any decree. And then the town had a major catastrophe. They came and prayed, nothing happened. The catastrophe continued. After a while, he came in a dream to some of the leaders of the community. He says, you know why I did not pray for you? I actually was awakened when you came to pray at my grave. But up in heaven, you see the truth. And I saw the benefits. Once you see the benefits, you can't ask for it to be taken away. You don't want the blessing to go away. So we need to understand God, everything is from God and God is good. These are the two facts. Now, there are two kinds of kindness. There is the simple kindness, eating ice cream. There is enjoying cheesecake. There is another kind of kindness that comes from God, and it's very painful and hurts, and it's the opposite of what we translate as life. My child asked me, how come God put vitamins in broccoli and kale and not in ice cream? Couldn't God put the vitamins in ice cream? And I said to him, I don't have an answer. I don't have an answer. Because God decided that kale contains vitamins, also bugs. So now we can't have it anymore. Why is it happening? I have no idea because I'm not the creator. But these are the facts. So there is something called good. There is something called greater good, deeper good. I shared with you the example of the sun. If you look directly at the sun, you're going to get blinded because the sun is so bright. So how do we enjoy day? We put blinders. We have a sun's ray that comes out. What happens if God removes all the covers? In the Kabbalah we read, if you read in the text of the creation of the universe, when God created the sun, it's not the sun we have today. It was way, way brighter. And God covered that. He put a sheath to cover the sun, so some call it the ozone layer, that the heat of the sun will not consume us. Now, what happens if that covering, if that jacket is removed? It can hurt, but the sun itself is a great, great benefit to us. The solar system can power the entire universe with so much energy that it contains. Therefore, says the Rebbe, when God cares about, that's why those who God loves, he rebukes. That because this is the point. So I'm giving you a summary because I want to get to the end of the chapter today. So if I have a father and I have an uncle, who as a child, who do you think I love more? When my father comes home or when the uncle comes home? What do you say?
Uncle.
Why the uncle?
Presents?
Because the uncle is always for presents. And the father is, did you make your homework? Did you study? It's bedtime. You must finish what's on your plate. So the father, children don't enjoy as much as they enjoy the grandfather or the aunt and the uncle. But the father is there because he's much closer to the child, because he cares way more, because only through the father the child will be brought up to be a mensch, to be a good human being. When God takes somebody and afflicts the person, we as a passerby, and I gave you the introduction, I don't want to spend more time. I'm not here to pass judgment. If someone suffers, I pray for them, for God to take care, because God can make magic. People who have close relatives who are dying or are faced with an ailment, we should pray. We should beg God to change it. That's the idea of prayer, and that's the idea of everything we do on all holidays. By the way, it's a plug for the survival service on Rosh Hashanah in the morning, 9:30 to 10:15. We're going to talk about prayer, what prayer is all about. I have a much deeper understanding of what prayer is about. But back to our discussion. When something happens that's not good, people do suffer greatly. We need to understand it is because God is closer to that person. And that's why it's like the sun is removed from its covering. That's why the Proverbs compare the Ohavav, the lovers of God, those who love God. God is closer to them, so he can rebuke them and he can make sure that they are raised in a proper way. So there are two types of good. That's why the Torah, the halacha, the Jewish law says, you must bless God, you must thank God for the pain as much as you thank God for a blessing. So when my son gets married, I'm extremely excited. When a child or a parent or a relative is about to die, it's very painful. We cry, we beg God not to do it. It shouldn't happen, it should change. But at the same time, when it happens, we need to realize it's from God. And if it is from God, it's because God is closer to that person. Again, I'm not here to judge. I'm not here to tell you should ask for those, so to say, painful experiences or difficulties, but they are part of who we are. They are part of personality. Kabbalah takes it and says, by the way, it's based on the Torah. As I said, the Proverbs, and the Rabbi is going to bring many texts to show it that it's very challenging to accept that. I think I shared with you the story of the rabbi who said that where he lost his rafts. Remember, the rafts went by and he lost everything. And the student said, I'm going to take a chance with that rabbi. And he started asking him about the Talmudic statement that you have to thank God for evil as much as you thank God for the blessing. And then he kept grilling the rabbi. And the rabbi says, oh, of course, you got to dance. You go out dancing because it means God cares about you. And the student told the rabbi, okay, so it's time for you to start dancing. And he fainted. When he woke up, they asked the rabbi, what happened? You're preaching so much about that. And the rabbi says, yeah, this is also a difficult part. According to one version, he says, this is a Talmudic statement that's difficult for me to understand. And the second one, the rabbi says, that's the difference between when it happens to me versus when it happens to somebody else. So I'm not here to judge anybody. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm just sharing with you the Kabbalah understanding of pain. And I do believe that once you internalize it, it will help. For someone else outside, we need to show compassion. We need to be show empathy. We need to care. We need to pray for it to go away. There is no doubt, and help as much as we can. But at the same time, realize there is no room for sadness. That's the point that the rabbis make, because actually it brings us closer to God. So I shared with you many stories that when a person is jumping from joy amidst great tragedy, sometimes God takes it away from that person because it was a test. He is testing him. Anybody knows the story of Abraham taking his son Isaac to be sacrificed? It was the 10th test. God tested Abraham 10 times. They took away his wife. They took away all his wealth. They stole his wells. And then he tells God, slaughter your son. The Medrash tells us that part of the challenge was, as he was walking, God did not give him a location. He didn't give him a GPS coordinate. He says to him, go to the place I'll show you, and that's where you place him on the altar. And he kept walking. He walked for how long? Anybody? He walked for 3 days. It says by the third day he saw a cloud hanging over a mountain, so he knew that's the place. But the Medrash tells us that there are verses in Psalm that are recorded that Abraham came all the way, he came in, he sees that he has to follow that cloud, and he came to a river, to a made-up river that the Satan, the evil, tried to prevent Abraham from obeying God. So there was a body of water, and he kept walking. Now, Abraham came from Iraq. In Iraq, he did not learn how to swim, and he didn't know how to swim, so he was walking and walking until the water came up to his neck. And he turned to God and says, Oshieni Elokim, save me, God, ki ba'u mayim ad nafesh. The water came all the way to my soul, because if I'm continuing, I won't be able to breathe. That's when he saw it was all an imagination. In other words, as soon as he's steadfast about going on with his service of God, he realizes that this was only a test. So God sometimes takes away the difficulty because it's a test, and therefore once we pass the test, there is no room for it. And for that I have a story, and I shared the story before, but it's worth mentioning very briefly. There were two men, very holy men, Reb Zusha and his brother, Reb Elimelech, Reb Zusha of Anipoli. And they were once taken into custody, jail. They were put to jail because people blame that the homeless don't belong in town because they are the criminals breaking into stores. And they were sleeping in the street at night because they passed by the town. So they were taken into jail. Came the morning, there was a pail of all what, a pail for going to the bathroom. And Reb Zusha started crying, or he got depressed. Why? Because in the morning when sunrise, you have to thank God. You have to say the prayers. You have to say Shema. You have to put on tefillin. But if you are next to a pail of this type, you're not allowed to. It's against Jewish law to pray to God, to mention God's name within the confines, within the room of where there is such a thing. So he got upset. He was very upset. How come? He wants to serve God. He wants to do the right thing, and God does not allow him. His brother turned to him and he says, I don't understand you. Why are you upset? Because you cannot pray, but you don't pray now because God said not to pray. So you have an opportunity to serve God by obeying God's command not to pray. How about we go and dance, because it's the first time in our life that we can serve God by not doing something. So they start dancing. And as I'm sure you can imagine, dance and joy is contagious. So the other men, mobsters, gangsters, whatever was there, says, can we join? He said, of course, the more the merrier. And before you know it, they were circling around that bucket of
waste.
Of waste.
Of waste.
For lack of a better word. And the guard, the warden, he sees the prisoners are happy, and it doesn't sit well with them. So he walks in, he pulls out somebody, says, why are you dancing? And the guy said, I don't know, they're dancing, they're happy, so I want to, let the time pass, and I want to enjoy. So he pulls another one. Finally, the other guy said, I don't know, these two strangers, we've never seen them before, they're in jail, and they're pointing out to the pail, and they're dancing because of the pail. So I'm sure there's something about the pail that makes them dance. And the guy says, oh, if it's so, I'm going to take away the reason for the joy. So he breaks the circle and he grabbed that pail and says, I'm taking it out of the room. So Elimelech turned to Zusha, he said, you see, you served God by not praying. Now God is taking it away. It's time for us to serve God by praying and serving God. In other words, they were depressed about what the brother was unable to serve God. So what does God do? When the brother told them, this is the way to serve God, there's nothing wrong. God saw that they passed the test and they brought joy. So therefore, God can bring them back to serve God among joy. And I think I showed you that joy will connect us to God no matter what. So when we are, I'm not advocating at funerals to start dancing and celebrating. I'm not advocating someone is not well to go and dance, but the attitude needs to be that we serve God every moment of our life. And therefore, if I'm faced a challenge, I'm unable to find work, I'm unable to find a spouse, I'm unable to live good, a hurricane came, again, it's not something I'm going to tell anybody because it's wrong. I need to show empathy. But people need to realize that they have an opportunity to serve God in a much deeper level. And one more story, and again, this is a story I shared with you about the Rebbe. The Rebbe's helper, Reb Shalom Dov Ber Gansburg, once forgot to remove the cover of the sukkah. And by a holiday came, by the time he remembered, it was very late, and he was very depressed. And the Rebbe turned to him during Chol HaMoed, 2-3 days later, and he says, you cannot take away one sin with another sin. In other words, you committed a sin, let's say, but getting rid of that sin can be done with joy. Celebrate God with joy, and not by getting depressed and being upset, which makes a person sin again. So with one sin, you cannot serve God, and you cannot get rid of the previous sin. There was, I just for the sake of stories, 2 more stories. There was a couple who had a big fight on the night of Passover. Passover is a very, so to say, delicate night because there are so many requirements. Usually the family members are very, very tense and very tired because 5 days before they are enslaved. I don't know, today it's a different story. You buy catered food or you go to the public seder. When I was raised, so 2 weeks before, there was no school already. And we don't have, for example, summer vacation was only 3 weeks, not 2 months, because studying Torah is important. But for Passover, from them 14 days, why you need to help your mothers clean. My mother would make us wash the baseboards, the panel, the baseboard. We had to brush it. Why? I have no idea until today. We had to take the refrigerator and slave. My father was at work, take it outside so my mother can hose it, because cleaning with Kleenex or with chlorine is not enough. You have to hose it and make it very, very shiny. The same is about books. Once a year, you have to take out all the books and bang them a few times and let them get freshened up. So you have to hang them outside on the bars by the porch to get the sunlight or some fresh air before I put them back. I should say that paper in Israel is a lesser quality and it actually gets old, and a lot of ash or worms that come in. So you open them up, it will prevent. Today here, we don't do that. But there was a lot of work. So imagine comes Passover night, everybody's tired. Everybody's anxious. The day of your Passover, you're very restricted to what you can eat. You can't eat matzah. You can't eat any food that's in the charoset. You cannot eat bread. So people are very, very hungry. And so it's very easy that if someone made a small mistake, it becomes a major mistake. It's unfortunately, it's one of those times that things are very, very tense. So a couple came into the rabbi in the morning of Passover, and the husband is demanding a divorce. Why? Because his wife, he instructed her to make sure to cook the food al dente, just, and she overcooked it. It was on the fire for another 5 minutes. Actually, I'm not so sure that it tasted different, but it smelled a little burnt. So he was so angry because his mother-in-law is going to blame him that he's not helping the wife, and his brother was there, and the wife and his sister-in-law, and they're always gonna say how bad the food in the house, and then and it's going on. When the rabbi heard the husband, he turned to the wife and says, "What do you have to say?" She says, "I have nothing to say. I try my best. He's expecting an angel." And the rabbi turned to the husband and says, what do you think? And he says, what do you mean? That's her job. She failed. She's not doing her job. I'm embarrassed. I can't go to synagogue today. So the rabbi says, let me call my wife. I think she's wise enough to maybe help us. So he called the wife and he says to her, Bela, last night when we had the Seder, was everything okay? She says, yeah, why? So he said to her, no, everything was perfect. She said, yeah. She says, what about the wine? Oh, the wine. What was wrong with the wine? He says, tell me, I make the wine every year, right? She said, yeah, every year for Passover, you make your own wine. And what happened last night? Was it my wine? So she kind of got very nervous and she says, why are you asking? He says, just, I promise whatever you say stays here, doesn't go anywhere, will not have an impact on our relationship. Tell everybody the truth. She says, to be honest, the big barrel, it's a glass barrel, big bottle of 5 gallons of wine broke because I was in a rush and I didn't realize when I walked into the house from the cellar that it broke. So what I did was I actually borrowed from different people bottles of wine, and I combined it together. Now, this is a big no-no in wine. And also for Passover, if it's not your wine, it's the worst thing you can do. So the husband turned to her and when you served me, do you think that I tasted it? Or I did not feel the difference? She says, well, when you tasted it, you looked, you smelled, you sniffed, and you said, wow, I just made this year's wine. It's very tasty. It's a very good wine. I must have had some magic. And then the second cup, I did the same. He says to his wife, he says to the couple, when my wife messed up, I knew full well when she served me that it's not the wine that I wanted. I knew it's a mix of wine. It didn't taste good. Actually, it was very difficult to taste. But I knew that the reason I drink the wine is because God had commanded us. And the same God that commanded us to drink 4 cups of wine on Passover commanded us to have peace in the house. So I said to myself, just a minute, if I'm going to rebuke my wife or not be happy, I will not be serving God. So there is no room for it. And he turned to the husband and he says, you need to take notes that it's either you're serving yourself or you're serving God. But if you're serving yourself, you can't use God for your personal emotional expression. If you're serving God, you need to take into account your wife's needs, and your wife makes mistakes. Not only you shouldn't be upset, but you should be there to support her, because this is part of what God wants from us. It's part of the way we serve God. Serving God is in the code of law. Eat matzah, drink wine, make sure the house is clean, say the Haggadah. But the foundation for all of that is to live in peace with your wife. If you don't live in peace with your wife, there's the matzah and the wine serve no purpose. How much more so if this is the cause of the separation. In other words, there are times when God is creating challenges for us, but he is allowing us to grow. And the rabbi is going to delve into it in great details. He is allowing us to prove to God that we are worthy of blessings. So the fact that the rabbi did not have the wine that he was really looking forward the whole winter because he worked for it for months. And this is once a year that he enjoyed 4 cups of a very tasty wine. Yeah, because that's a season. Yet, when this did not work, he realized that if the goal is to serve God, he has a greater opportunity to serve God. And that is without enjoying doing what's right. And this is part of the way the rabbi is going to explain. You can serve God when things work well, but you serve God to a greater degree when things are not well, when things did not work out, because God is allowing you to come closer, and God himself is come closer to us. I hope I made myself clear, and I want to get to the text because I want to finish. I have some more stories. We'll get to more stories.
That's fine. Explain the purpose of the lesson.
The idea is that they should drive the point. I am reading on the bottom of page 356. Man sees misfortune only because he cannot perceive that which derives from a higher hidden level of godliness. In truth, however, the misfortunes are actually blessing in disguise. On the contrary, they represent an even higher level of good than the revealed good, since they originate in a higher world. And the rabbi is going to go into Kabbalistic terminology, that blessing comes from a lower aspect of godliness, while curses, pain, suffering come from a much greater level of godliness. And a short introduction. God is reflected or is expressed in this universe with 6 names. According to Maimonides, there are 7 names. God has many names, but there are 6 names you will find in the Bible. The 2 most common names is Elohim, Lord, and Havaya. I'm changing the letters because it's inappropriate to carry God's name in vain. Havaya is Yud and a Hey and a Vav and a Hey. It's a 4-letter. We're going to call it the 4-letter name. It's a much greater name of God, meaning representing or expressing godliness to a greater degree. Elohim disguises itself in nature. The way the sun and the moon, the oceans, the earth, all that is created is Elohim. Havaya is outside nature, supernatural. Havaya itself is divided into 2 parts. First is Yud K, 15. Yud is 10, Hey is 5. And then Vav K. Vav is 6, Hey is 5. So you have 15 and 11. Together it's 26. God's name is equals 26. The 2 parts of the 4-letter represent 2 levels of godliness that affects humans. One is the natural, it's called the lower part of the 4-letter, which is all the blessings, miracles, supernatural blessing, giving birth, finding a spouse, having a job, being protected. It's from Yud K. Vav K, on the other hand, represent that which is hidden, that which we cannot comprehend or understand, and it translates in this universe with painful, difficult, taking away, hiding God. So when someone appreciates it and thank God for that, the same as he thanks God for a blessing, he is actually connected to a higher level of godliness. That's the point that I was going to make. For this reason, our sages stated that the verse, those who love him shall be as the sun when it comes out of its might, refers to the reward of those who rejoice in their afflictions. God, I should tell you also, we are told that when Mashiach will arrive, when the world will come into its perfect state, when the way God desired it to be, we are told that God will remove the sun from its covering. It's a metaphor, meaning godliness will prevail and shine forth so brightly that there will be nothing hiding and nothing covering the sun. In other words, everything will be clear. Good, evil will all be very, very clear. There will be no desire to prove there is a God or to prove the difference between moral behavior and immoral behavior. Everything will be out there in a very simple manner. Just like if I eat poison or if I take some toxic chemicals, it hurts. That's exactly the same as would be misbehaving or speaking or acting inappropriately. That's why it's compared to the sun coming out of its mind. Says the rabbi that Proverbs tells us that those who are love God and appreciate challenges and actual difficulties, they are connected to God in a level where the sun is removed from its cover. God always reward men measure for measure. What is the connection then between rejoicing and affliction and the sun? Also, why are those who rejoice in affliction described as those who love God? How is it possible to say, I love God, therefore I enjoy all the pain and suffering? Says the Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe now explains that since misfortune is really nothing but a disguise for the higher form of good that derived from the hidden world, the option as to whether it will bring man either joy or misery depends on his priorities. If he deems his physical life all important, he will indeed be miserable. While if nearness to God is his primary concern, he will rejoice, since nearness to God is found in greater measure in the hidden world, whence derives the good that is hidden in misfortune. Says Rabbi, when someone is unhappy about misfortune, it's because this universe takes such priority, so important for them, and therefore they are hurt. How come I'm not making so much money? How come people don't like me? How come I lost my job? How come I'm not well? So in other words, this physical universe, it shows that they're distant from God. But if they realize it's from God and it's from a hidden world of God, then they actually come closer to God and they feel they have an opportunity to become closer to God, which therefore it makes them rejoice. I will not preach that to somebody. I want you to understand. If someone is in pain because their child don't talk to them, if someone is in pain because they lost a job, or the hurricane affected them, I am there to try and help them and connect them with their child and try and help them, advise them to seek their doctor's advice, and I'll be there, and you are the same. But we're talking about ourselves. Therefore, we need to let it be very clear. Those who rejoice in suffering are therefore called lovers of God and are rewarded by being granted the vision of the sun emerging in its might, since in this world they disregarded externals and ignored the veil of misfortune hiding the good within, choosing instead to concern themselves with the deeper aspect of good and godliness lying behind the veil. God reward them in the world to come, measure for measure, by casting off the veils that surround him and revealing himself in his full glory to those who love him. So when there is a pain and suffering in this universe, it's so to say a covering, a hiding cover, a jacket of godliness, God's blessings. When someone refuses to choose to be depressed or upset because he realizes it's from God, he sees beyond the veil. And therefore, God reward measure for measure. When the ultimate time comes, God will reveal himself just like the sun removed from its veil directly with that person. For the four-letter divine name, signifying God in his essence, is compared to a sun, and the name Elohim, signifying God as is clothed and concealed in the created universe, is compared to a veil shielding the created being from the intensity of its rays, as it is written, a sun and shield respectively are Hashem, that is the four-letter name Elohim. In the world to come, the sun will emerge from its shield, that is, the four-letter name will no longer be veiled by Elohim, and it will shine forth in its might as a reward for those who love him. This in summary is the explanation contained in the following paragraphs. Let me just make it clear. We know that the Oz, this is my imagination purely, okay? No scientific proof. No, if asking me for proof or science proof otherwise, I'll accept that. We have the sun, and there is an ozone layer. The purpose of the ozone layer is to protect us from the sun's ray. If the ozone layer is removed, what happens? The oceans start drying, the snow melts from mountains, and it affects humans and the earth. It's not good. In order for God to create the universe, he needed the power of creation, which is the four-letter, to be veiled. That's where Elohim comes, the second name of God. The second name is a veil, a sheath that covers God, four-letter name, and reveals only a little bit. Just like a teacher, a great professor who is going in to teach a first grader or a preschooler about an idea, he needs to veil his knowledge. He needs to veil the idea and give it to them in piecemeal, in small pieces. A child that just learned how to eat, even though he has teeth, you cannot give him beef. You cannot give him a piece of goulash. You have to give him a puree. You need to give them mashed potato. You cannot give them the real solid food until they grow up slowly but surely. In this process, in this universe, Elohim is hiding or veiling Havaya. What happens when a curse, misfortune, appears to a person? That's a revelation from God directly without that veil. Now, if that person accepts that to be no veil, the reward will be measure for measure, that when God reveals himself to that person, he will reveal himself also, removing the veil, and God will be there directly to him. That's why the Proverbs tells us, not Proverbs, Book of Psalms says to us that the sun and its veil is Havaya, Elohim does to Havaya. When the ultimate time, the universe will come to its purpose, then those who serve God and connect to God without having the veil interfere in the middle, God will also reveal himself to them without any veil. And that's what we're going to be reading about. For one's joy in affliction stems from the fact that being near to God is dearer to him than anything of the life of this world. As it is written, for you loving kindness is better than life. Now, the nearness to God is infinitely greater and more sublime in the hidden world, for there the concealment of his power is lodged, and it is also written, the Most High abides in secrecy. Both these verses indicate that the hidden world contains a higher aspect of godliness than the revealed world, since the hidden world is a source of seeming affliction. He who loves God rejoices in it, for it represents a greater nearness to God than revealed good, which derives from the revealed world. I hope this is easy to comprehend, and I want to continue. We spoke over that many times. Therefore, he is found worthy of seeing the sun emerging in its might in the world to come, when the sun will emerge from the sheath in which it is hidden in the world and will then be revealed. This means that what is presently the hidden world will then be revealed, and it will shine forth and glow in a great and intense revelation upon all who seek refuge in him in this world. Taking shelter in his shadow, the shadow of wisdom, which is presently in a state of shade, as opposed to the revealed light and goodness that is, they find shelter and refuge even in that which presents an external appearance of shade and darkness, whereas the light of goodness contained in it is concealed. This sufficient explanation for the understanding. So the rabbi made very, very simple point. I want to share a short story to it before we move to the next point. To return to our original point, when one considers that whatever appears as suffering is actually a higher form of good, he will no longer be saddened by or worried by it. Now, let me show you a short story before we move to the next point that I was making. There was a famous Chassid, a student of the Alter Rebbe, of this Rebbe, Reb Shmuel Munkes. That was his name. He used to make jokes. There are books about, comics about him. He used to make fun of people, of life. One day, a fire caught in his house, and his entire house was burnt. He was standing outside and dancing. He started dancing in circles. So people thought that he went out of his mind, because he is homeless now. His sofa, his dining room, everything is gone, bedroom.
Insurance was supposed to be given more.
And unfortunately, it didn't pay for insurance. So they see the guy is very happy. They say to him, you need Prozac? You need any medication? And he says, no, I'm very, very well. I'm doing great. I'm so happy. So they turn to him and they say, What happened that you're happy? You should be sad now. It's not pleasant. He says, I'll tell you why I'm happy. I thank God I am not an idol worshiper, and I'm a Jewish person that serve God. They said, why? He says, you see, everything is ashes now. Imagine I was an idol worshiper. My God would be burned to ashes too. But now that I'm Jewish, my God is still alive and around. So I'm happy. I look around, I says, God forbid I would have been like the neighbor, an idol worshiper. My God is gone. That's worse than my house. But being Jewish, my God is always here. Now, this is a true story that happened. But the Hasidim in Afabrengen taking it a step farther, deeper. They say, you think he's talking about a goy, an idol worshiper, but that's not true. Each one of us possess idol. My bank account, my car, my home, my health, my spouse. And at one point or another, it get burnt. And my idol get burnt. If all my life is about material, if all my life is about what I achieved and how great I am, sometimes we lose it. And if we lose it, then we lost everything. But what if I am grateful that I have a God, and that God no one can take away, and that God no one can touch, and God can be found everywhere I go. Then no matter what they do to me, I'm always happy because I'm close to God. And that's the point the Rabbi is making. You can serve God and prove that you're connected to God, not when things work well as much as when things are very painful. When people ask, where was God? When people say, give me food, I'll be able to serve God. Help me find, health. Help me find the money I need. Help me. That's because they have an idol, they created an idol, that's what will make them happy. And therefore it's taken away. They can't be happy. But as Jewish people, our God cannot get burned, cannot be taken away. And therefore that's a source of joy. The rabbi explained that with the Kabbalistic words, a letter explanation, that God's name, the hidden godliness is Yud Kei Vav Kei, 4 letters. The second part of the 2 letters are much higher form of godliness, and that's where, and it's hidden. And therefore, the good is hidden. And that's why the Torah tells us you have to thank God for a curse as much as for a blessing. And that's why someone who rejoices with God when a curse happens, just like a blessing, they are much closer to God. I hope I made this point very clear. We will delve into it in the next few chapters. I want to go to the next point. The Alter Rebbe now goes on to discuss different type of sadness that caused by one failing in matters of spirit. What happened if I try to serve God and I can't? My parents, my spouse don't let me study Torah. She tells me you cannot go to a synagogue. What happens if I want to be blessed with children to raise them to study Torah and God does not bless me? There are many, many challenges that are no ulterior motive. It's there for the serving of God. Why? How can I deal with that point of sadness that comes up from time to time? And I have some news for you. Everybody feels that. Everybody, including rabbis and holy men. As for sadness connected with heavenly matters, in other words, I say I'm all for God's sake. Nothing about me. I'm selfless. I want to serve you. I want to be able to come closer to you. Why are you preventing me from come closer to you? One must seek ways and means of freeing oneself from it. No room for sadness, period. That this applies to the time of one's divine service is self-evident, for one must serve God with joy and gladness of heart. There is no way you can say, I should serve God with sadness. So when I am upset because God did not bless me, and my goal is to serve God, I am distancing myself from God, because no joy, there is no God. But even one who is occupied in business and worldly affairs, should there descend upon him any sadness or anxiety about heavenly matters during his business affairs, It is certainly a trick of the evil inclination which saddens them ostensibly for spiritual reasons in order to lure him afterwards into lusts, God forbid, as it is well known. Says the Rebbe, if I pray to God and I get upset and I'm sad, how come you did not give me the opportunity to serve you better? There is no room for it because you can serve God when you're upset. But even while I'm a bus driver, I'm a Uber driver, I'm a farmer, I'm a teacher. In the middle of the day, in the middle of business, I start thinking about how is it possible that I am not blessed with the way to serve God. Says the Rebbe, know that it's a trick from the devil. We study at the beginning that the biggest trick of the devil is to make us slow down. He will make us sad, so we won't eat well, so we will go to bed early, and therefore we will not be at synagogue to pray, we'll skip serving God. In other words, it's a chain reaction that begins with taking away joy and energy from our life. So if it comes in the middle of the day, while I'm engaged in worldly matters, and now suddenly I'm thinking about all my faults and all my misfortune, for God's sake, it's not about my achievements, it's about serving God. I need to know this is the trick of the evil. He's finding a loophole. He's sticking the finger in the door. He's throwing his toe into the door. And so I get upset. So I slow down. I'm not in the mood. I'm going to go home early. When I go home early, I cannot talk to my spouse. I'm not interested in dinner. I'm tired. I'm lazy. And the next day is a day that is wasted. That's at best. That's the way the evil works. Says the Rebbe, joy, any reason for not having joy, if it is doing prayer or study of Torah, then definitely it takes you away from God at that moment. If it is doing the business and day-to-day affairs, it is the pathway to getting rid of your connection to God. It is certainly a trick. I'm reading it one more time before I turn the page. It is certainly a trick of the evil inclination which saddens them ostensibly for spiritual reasons in order to lure him afterwards into lusts, God forbid, as is well known. I don't know about you, but that's the way it works for me. It is man's nature to seek pleasure and not to remain depressed. If this feeling of spiritual failure distresses him, he will seek his pleasure in physical gratification. The evil inclination, therefore, wishes that one be depressed, be it even over spiritual matters, so that he will later succumb to temptation. What happened when I'm depressed? I need to relax. I can't be talking to you anymore. Don't talk to me. Give me a break. I'm going to find a good, tasty food or ice cream, and then I'm going to be by myself. Meaning, the evil will get us depressed just to remove us from our society, from energy, from life. And it's a chain reaction. One step, it's a domino effect. It starts by taking away joy. Therefore, joy is the key. If the joy is gone, there is no sin in getting sad. There is no sin in the Torah. However, what sadness can lead, how far from God, the farthest from any other sin. Because and again, if it's doing prayer or study or while we serve God, we are breaking away from God. If it's doing business hours, being busy with socializing, working, it is simply to get us into the bad mood so that it's hard for us to continue living a good life, and that will get us into all kinds of areas that we don't want to be found.
What's the best way to get out of the silence?
So first, the rabbi is going to deal with it in details. But the first thing is knowing the ailment is half the cure, okay? Know that no reason in the world to be sad. Even if it's for a holy reason. You know, the rabbi is talking about now because I want to serve God, and yet God is preventing me. You know, in Russia, there were a lot of Jewish people who gave up their life. They were suffering tremendously because they want to study Torah. They can ask God, I want to study Torah. You commanded us. You said you'll provide us with the needs. I'm not asking for a penthouse. I'm asking you just to live with my wife and children and study Torah. It is a good question. It is connecting to God to a much deeper level. But the most important the rabbi is making is there is no reason to get upset. The rabbi goes on to say, even if it's during the business hours, during social time, I get upset about not able to serve God, not about me not being a good person or not having so much money. This is the key for the evil inclination to enter into our life, causing us to derail from serving God. And the rabbi is a proof for it. For if it were not so, then this depression is the going of the Yetzer Hara, from where that this depression is the going for the Yetzer Hara. From where would that genuine sadness, one that is derived from love or fear of God, come to him in the midst of his business affairs? Says Rabbi, you want to know how I prove it's the evil, not the godliness? In the middle of the day, you're busy walking, you're driving an Uber. How come you're thinking about your distance from God? It cannot come from the godly soul. The godly soul now is not working, is out of work. He's on a break. He's going to come back to you when you pray and study. But in the middle of the day, getting depressed about my relationship with God must be from the evil. Only the evil is awake. Only the evil is working now, not the godly soul. Since a genuine sadness is an expression of love or fear of God, since a genuine sadness is an expression of love or fear of God, it should express itself at a time when these emotions are active, doing prayer, Torah study, and the like, but not doing one's business. Clearly, then, the sadness is artificial, created by the Yetzer Hara, by the evil inclination, for its own purpose, and one must therefore rid himself of it. The next paragraph provides the means. Whether the depression settles upon him during his service of God in Torah study or prayer, or when he is not engaged thus but with his material affairs, this is what he should consider. In other words, no matter where the thoughts of getting sad enters, either you're doing study Torah or prayer, or during the time you're doing business, say to yourself, now is not the proper time for genuine sadness, nor even for worry over grave sins, God forbid. You would say to yourself, that's not the time. God gave me this moment to have joy, to be happy, and you have a legitimate reason to be upset and to be sad. Not now. It has to. We'll find another point. For this, one must set aside opportune time when the mind is calm to reflect on the greatness of God against whom he has sinned. Yeah, there is a time to be sad. There would be a set time. I will dedicate time to reflect of my relationship with God, my reflection with my surrounding. How do I conduct myself? I should be upset about misbehaving. I should be upset about my relationship with God. But I have to set aside beforehand, segregate it, and make sure that afterwards, I am changing back to be a happy person. So that thereby his heart will truly be rent with genuine bitterness. That is, bitterness, remorse, as opposed to depression. The former is alive and active, while the latter is resigned and dead. It is explained elsewhere when this time should be. Later on, the rabbi is going to get into great details, the difference between depression or bitterness. Bitterness, I'm bitter about my situation, but it motivates me to act. Sadness takes away energy from me. I'm unable to cope. I'm unable to live a life. It is also explained that immediately after his heart has been broken during those appointed times, he should completely remove the sorrow from his heart, and he should believe with perfect faith that God has erased his sin and that he pardons abundantly. Thus, even if one has sinned repeatedly against him, God will readily forgive him as though he had sinned for the first time, unlike men who easily forgives at first offenses, but finds it difficult to do so when he offends it oft repeated, when the offense is oft repeated. This knowledge that God has surely cleansed him of his sins is the true joy in God, which follows the sadness, as explained above, that the virtue of sadness lies in the joy to which it gives rise. We studied at the beginning of the chapter that sadness will bring profit. If you remember, profit, the benefit it will bring. If I segregate time once a month, once a week, to take a half an hour to reflect on my behavior, to reflect on my faults, to reflect on my doing things that I shouldn't, then it will motivate me. And I realize God will forgive. Unlike human being, I can repeat, even though it's a repeated offense, God will forgive me as if I did it the first time. Then at the end, a sigh of relief. God has turned the page for me and he's opening up again one. Now the profit, the benefit it yields is a great joy because I have a fresh new start. That's the idea of Rosh Hashanah. That's the idea of every Shabbat. That's the idea of every Rosh Chodesh to turn to God. And that's this designated time for it. So let's summarize. Everything is from God. If everything is from God, it must be good. There is regular good, earning a good living, living a healthy life, and there is hidden good. When there is a roadblocks, challenges, painful experiences, there can be a roadblock in the service of God. There can be a roadblock in our personal life. Both of them are reflecting God's hidden love and connecting deeper into God. If we are able to stand by and rejoice and appreciate it, it will connect us deeper into God. And finally, even if we have thoughts of our faults and misbehaving, we need to know it's not from godly, because God wants us to be happy. It's not from the godly soul. If we are segregating a certain time just to reflect on our misbehaving, asking God forgiveness, it should lead to joy. The outcome will be great joy because I reestablish my relationship with God. Imagine you and your spouse, you and your child, where you had a conflict and you are not talking to each other or angry at each other. You take the time and you apologize and you feel sad about the behavior. The outcome would be a much greater bond and a much greater joy as a result. And that's exactly a reflection of my relationship with God. This concludes chapter 26. Chapter 27 will be about what happens when this melancholy and the thoughts of sadness penetrate my mind, regardless of what I do to try and fight it. How do we combat this type of melancholy? I want to wish everybody Shana Tova and remind you that for the next 4 weeks, we will not be studying. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi. Very good, very